Listen closely. Do you hear it? That's the sound of 1,000 men right now, at this very moment, texting "I miss you" to someone who deleted their number 3 months ago. It's the Symphony of the Damned, conducted by Hope's skeletal fingers. I once knew a man who kept every love letter he'd ever received in a mahogany box beneath his bed. When his house caught fire, he let the flames take everything: his books, his paintings, even the manuscript he'd spent 7 years writing. But he crawled through smoke to save that box. Years later, I asked him why. He laughed, a sound like glass breaking underwater, and said, "Because I needed proof that I was once worth lying to." This is what Machiavelli knew, but never wrote in The Prince. Distance isn't just space between bodies. It's the sharpest weapon in love's arsenal, the blade that cuts both ways, leaving scars that spell out truths we dare not read in daylight. Picture this. A man sits in a cafe in Prague, the same table where Kafka once wrote about metamorphosis. He's scrolling through her Instagram, watching her life unfold in carefully curated squares. She's smiling in every photo, that practiced smile that never quite reaches her eyes, the one he used to kiss away at 3 a.m. when the world felt too heavy. He knows she's performing happiness the way a pianist performs Chopin, technically perfect, emotionally hollow. But here's the grotesque comedy. He's performing too. His absence is his greatest performance, his silence more eloquent than any poet's confession. The ancient Greeks had a word, apatheia, not apathy as we butcher it today, but a divine indifference, a state where the soul becomes impervious to the arrows of desire. They carved statues of gods with empty eyes because divinity meant freedom from the fever dream of wanting. But we're addicted to the fever. We mistake the symptoms for the cure. Here's what they don't tell you in those relationship podcasts with their sanitized wisdom. Every text you don't send is a small death. Every call you don't make is a funeral for what could have been. But, and lean in close for this secret, in those deaths lies a terrible resurrection. Distance teaches what proximity never could. That love's greatest tragedy isn't unrequited feeling, but the realization that most love is just elaborate self-deception wearing a beautiful mask. I remember reading a 2024 study from the University of Copenhagen. Researchers found that men who practiced radical emotional distance for 6 months reported not happiness, exactly, but something stranger. A kind of crystalline clarity, as if they'd been looking at life through frosted glass, and suddenly someone had wiped it clean. One participant described it like waking up from a dream where you thought you were drowning, only to realize you were never in water at all. Do you smell that? It's the scent of autumn leaves burning, mixed with the cologne she bought you last Christmas, the one you still wear like a masochist's rosary. That's the perfume of distance. Memory fermented into poison, nostalgia aged into wine too bitter to drink but too precious to pour away. Consider the spider. When it spins its web, it creates distance between itself and its prey, but also between itself and the world. The web is both trap and home, weapon and weakness. We are all spiders now, spinning digital webs, catching likes and comments like flies, feeding on attention while starving for connection. But the spider knows a secret we forget. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is cut your own web and fall into the darkness below. Here's the thing about distance as a weapon. It's not meant to wound others. Oh, it does, certainly. She'll feel it like a phantom limb, reaching for her phone at 2 a.m., finding only silence where your name used to light up her screen. But the real target? That's you. Distance is the sword you fall on to kill the version of yourself that needed her to breathe. Schopenhauer wrote about porcupines huddling for warmth in winter, constantly adjusting their distance. Too close, and they wound each other with their quills. Too far, and they freeze. But what if freezing is the point? What if the cold teaches us something the warmth never could? Tell me, listener, when did you last sit with your own silence without reaching for your phone to fill it? When did you last let the distance stretch until it sang? Every relationship has a room dedicated to futures that died at birth. There's a legend from medieval Transylvania about a count who built a castle with 1,000 rooms, each one for a different woman he'd loved. But here's the twist: they don't tell children. He never let any of them inside. The castle stood empty, a monument to possibility, while he died alone in a shepherd's hut, dreaming of doorways he'd never walked through. We're all curators now, aren't we? Building museums in our minds, displaying artifacts of relationships that exist more vividly in imagination than they ever did in flesh. That conversation you rehearse in the shower, the one where you finally say everything perfectly, where she finally understands, where the music swells and the credits roll, that's your masterpiece, hung in a gallery no one else can visit. I once watched a man at a funeral, not crying, not speaking, just standing there like a question mark made of meat and regret. Later, at the wake, drunk on whiskey and grief, he told me, "She wasn't my wife, wasn't even my lover. We had coffee once, 15 years ago, but I built a whole life with her in my head. Had our children's names picked out, knew what her favorite breakfast would have been. Now she's dead, and I'm mourning a marriage that never existed. Tell me," and here his eyes looked like broken windows, "which loss is real?" This is the excruciating mathematics of modern love. We fall not for people, but for potentials. Each swipe right is a lottery ticket to a future we've already furnished with impossible furniture. A 2023 Harvard study found that people spend an average of 47 minutes a day in romantic fantasy projection, building elaborate scenarios with people they barely know. That's 285 hours a year living in houses made of smoke, making love to ghosts dressed in tomorrow's clothes. But here's where it gets deliciously dark. The museum of what never was is always more beautiful than the gallery of what is. Reality has termites. It has morning breath and credit card debt and the way she chews too loudly when she's nervous. But possibility? Possibility is perfect. It's preserved in amber. Forever 25. Forever laughing at your jokes. Forever just about to kiss you for the first time. Let me paint you a picture with bile and beauty. There's a man in Tokyo who's been taking the same train for 11 years. Same car, same time. Because once, a woman smiled at him through the window as the trains passed. He doesn't know her name, doesn't know if she's alive. But every morning at 7:47, he stands in position, looking for a ghost in glass. His friends think he's devoted to his job. His punctuality is legendary. But we know the truth, don't we? He's not going to work. He's going to church. And his God is a smile that lasted 3 seconds in 2013. The Buddhists have a word, shunyata, often translated as emptiness, but that's like calling the ocean wet. It really means the pregnant void, the nothing that contains everything. That's what the museum of what never was really is. Not empty rooms, but rooms so full of possibility they can't hold actual furniture. Here's the kicker, the punchline to this cosmic joke. We're addicted to the museum. A neuroscientist in Stockholm discovered in 2024 that imagining romantic scenarios activates the same neural pathways as cocaine. Let that sink in like water into lungs. Your fantasies are literally drugs, and you're the dealer, the user, and the DEA all rolled into one magnificent mess. Remember Kierkegaard's trembling hand as he broke off his engagement to Regine? He spent the rest of his life writing love letters to the idea of her, crafting a relationship so perfect in retrospect that the real woman could never have competed. She married another man, had children, lived a full life. But in Kierkegaard's museum, she's forever 19, forever heartbroken, forever about to forgive him. And what about you? Oh, come now, don't pretend you don't have your own museum. We all do. Maybe it's that person from university who kissed you once during a fire drill and then transferred schools. Maybe it's your ex's sister who laughed at your jokes a little too long at that Christmas party. Maybe it's someone you've never even met. Just a profile picture that looked like home. The museum guards work for free. They're called songs and scents and specific shades of lipstick in pharmacy aisles. They're called autumn afternoons that feel exactly like that October when everything almost happened. They're called 2 a.m. and whiskey and the word maybe spoken in past tense. So, here's my question, curator. What's your most prized exhibit? Which never was breaks your heart most beautifully? And more importantly, when will you realize that the museum's visiting hours are your actual life ticking away? To be loved is to be slowly drained, yet we bare our necks willingly. She texts you at 3:17 a.m. I had that dream again. You know which dream. The one where you're both drowning, but only one of you wants to be saved. Your thumb hovers over the keyboard like a surgeon over a beating heart. You could respond. You could not. Both choices taste like copper pennies, the flavor of blood or old wishes. You can't tell which anymore. Here's a bedtime story for insomniacs. In 1847, a Russian nobleman discovered his wife was slowly poisoning him with mercury in his tea. The twist? He knew for months, but kept drinking it. When asked why at his deathbed, he smiled, mercury silver on his lips, and said, "It was the only thing she made just for me." This is love's dirtiest secret, whispered in the confessionals of therapists' offices and written in the suicide notes of romantics. We don't want to be saved. We want to be consumed. Every "I love you" is really "I give you permission to destroy me in ways I haven't imagined yet." Consider the mechanics of vampirism. Not the Hollywood version with capes and coffins, but the real thing. A 2025 psychological study from the University of Gothenburg called it emotional hemophilia, the condition where people literally cannot stop bleeding themselves dry for others. The subjects showed actual physiological changes: decreased red blood cell count, chronic fatigue, elevated cortisol. They were being drained, scientifically, measurably, undeniably. And when offered treatment, 73% declined. But here's where it gets exquisitely perverse. The vampire needs permission, always has, in every culture's mythology. They can't cross the threshold uninvited. And we don't just invite them in, we give them the guest room, cook them breakfast, beg them to stay when they try to leave at dawn. I knew a woman once, brilliant neurosurgeon, published poet, could have been anything, who fell in love with mediocrity incarnate. A man who collected unemployment like baseball cards and complaints like vintage wine. She paid his rent, wrote his resume, apologized when he cheated. Her friends staged interventions like seances, trying to summon back the person she used to be. But she just smiled that morphine-drip smile and said, "You don't understand. When he hurts me, at least I know I'm alive." The Aztecs believed the heart was a caged hummingbird, and love was letting someone hold the cage. Sometimes they shake it just to watch the bird panic. Sometimes they forget to feed it. Sometimes they open the door, and the bird, having forgotten how to fly, refuses to leave. Here's what Nietzsche understood in his syphilitic delirium. The will to power and the will to submission are the same coin spinning in air. We want to conquer and be conquered, to eat and be eaten, to possess and be possessed. It's not contradiction, it's completion. The Ouroboros doesn't swallow its tail because it's hungry. It does it because the circle must close, even if it means devouring yourself. Picture this grotesque ballet. Two people in a relationship, each convinced they're the victim, each secretly the vampire. She drains his ambition. He drains her joy. She feeds on his attention. He feeds on her insecurity. They're locked in an eternal waltz, fangs in each other's necks, both dying, both insisting it's love. And maybe it is. Maybe that's the most horrifying truth. That love and parasitism share the same Latin root, to cleave, meaning both to cling and to split apart. A professor in Prague, the city can't escape its vampires, documented what he called romantic Stockholm syndrome in 2024. Subjects showed increased dopamine production when their partners hurt them, literally getting high on their own destruction. One participant, a concert pianist who gave up performing because her boyfriend said her music made him feel stupid, described it. It's like drowning in honey, sweet, golden, and absolutely lethal, but at least it tastes good going down. The vampire's paradox isn't that we love what destroys us. That's just garden variety masochism, boring as suburban adultery. The paradox is that we're grateful for the destruction. We send thank you notes to our executioners. We write poetry about the hands that strangle us. We take selfies with our wounds and caption them #blessed to bleed. But listen, do you hear that sound? It's not your phone buzzing. It's not your heart breaking. It's the sound of 10,000 people right now, at this exact moment, typing "I'm sorry" to someone who should be apologizing to them. It's the symphony of the drained, conducted by love's skeletal fingers, and every note sounds like permission. So tell me, my nocturnal friend, whose teeth marks do you carry? And more deliciously, whose neck do you dream of when the moon is dark? Because we're all vampires here, pretending to be victims, and the only real question is, are you brave enough to admit which role you prefer? Where "I love you" goes to die and become archaeology. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was hey. 2 letters, 3 letters. An entire universe of cowardice compressed into a casual greeting. How many love stories died stillborn in that digital womb? How many symphonies reduced to elevator music? But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's start where all autopsies should, with the corpse. There's a monastery in Switzerland where monks have taken a vow of silence for the past 400 years. Not a word, not a whisper. They communicate through glances, gestures, the angle of a tilted head. Last year, a documentarian asked one of them, through written notes, if he missed speaking. The monk wrote back, "I have learned that silence is not the absence of communication. It's the presence of truth." Now, think about your last relationship. No, really think. Can you remember the exact moment language began to die? It starts small. Love becomes nothing. The garden of your vocabulary, once lush with metaphors and midnight confessions, slowly turns to drought. Words become dandelions, pretty weeds that mean nothing. I collect dead languages the way others collect stamps. Not Latin or Aramaic. Those had dignity in death. I mean the private languages lovers create and abandon. The pet names that now make you wince. The inside jokes that feel like swallowing glass. The way she said your name when she was happy versus when she was pretending to be. Here's a fun exercise in masochism. Go through your old texts. Watch the decay in real time. Watch paragraphs shrink to sentences, shrink to words, shrink to emojis, shrink to read receipts, shrink to silence. It's like time-lapse photography of fruit rotting, except the fruit is your heart and the flies are memories, sir. A linguist at MIT published a paper in 2024 titled "The Syntax of Romantic Entropy." She analyzed 50,000 text conversations from couples, mapping the degradation of language over time. Her findings: the average relationship loses 1,000 words per month. By the end, most couples communicate in a pidgin dialect of exhaustion and habit. K becomes a complete sentence. Whatever becomes a philosophy. Silence becomes a language fluent in nothing. But here's the beautiful horror. We keep speaking even when the words are dead. We're necromancers of meaning, puppeteering corpses of conversations. "How's your day?" means I'm too tired to care but too guilty not to ask. "I'm fine" means I'm drowning but you're not a lifeguard anymore. "We need to talk" means the garden is on fire and we're arguing about the color of the ashes. Let me tell you about the Library of Babel. Not Borges' infinite maze, but the one we each carry in our skulls. Every sweet nothing you ever whispered is archived there, cataloged under fiction. Every promise preserved in formaldehyde. Every forever fossilized like ancient insects in amber, beautiful and utterly extinct. The Japanese have a word, kotodama, the spirit that dwells in words. They believe words have souls, can bless or curse, can literally reshape reality. If that's true, then every abandoned "I love you" is a ghost. Every unspoken apology is a haunting. We're all mediums at a seance, trying to contact the living through dead languages. Here's what Wittgenstein knew when he wrote, "Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent." Sometimes the truest thing you can say is nothing, but we're addicted to noise. We'd rather speak in dead languages than admit we have nothing left to say. A composer in Vienna spent 3 years writing a symphony using only the sounds of couples arguing. He recorded fights in 17 languages, then removed the words, leaving only the melody of conflict. The result? It sounded exactly like a lullaby. Because that's what we do. We sing ourselves to sleep with the same words that keep us awake. Consider this delicious paradox. The more we need to say something, the less able we are to say it. The words that matter most: "I'm sorry," "Stay," "I was wrong," "I choose you." These get stuck in our throats like bones. Instead, we say everything else. We talk about the weather while the house burns. We discuss dinner plans while the relationship starves. We become poets of avoidance, Shakespeare of the unsaid. But sometimes, and lean in close for this secret, silence is not surrender. Sometimes, it's the only honest language left. When words have been weaponized past recognition. When "I love you" has been said so many times it sounds like static. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop talking. There's a man in Barcelona who hasn't spoken to his ex-wife in 7 years, not out of anger, out of respect. He told me, "We killed every beautiful word we knew. Speaking now would be like graffiti on a gravestone." So here's my question, you beautiful mute. What words have you murdered with repetition? What promises lie buried in your garden? And when? Tell me truly. When did you realize that the opposite of communication isn't silence, but continuing to speak when you have nothing left to say? How solitude becomes a throne when you stop apologizing for sitting on it. They found him in his apartment 3 weeks after he died. Not because of the smell. He'd lived so cleanly that even death couldn't make him messy. They found him because his plants started dying. The neighbors noticed the orchids in his window turning brown and called the police. When they entered, they discovered something that made the headlines dance between horror and envy. He'd died smiling, in a chair facing the sunset, a cup of tea still warm in his hands, and a note that simply said, "Finally." This isn't a cautionary tale. It's a love story. See, we've been sold a lie wrapped in rom-com ribbons and delivered by algorithms. That solitude is a disease and companionship is the cure. But what if, and breathe deep before this heresy, what if solitude isn't emptiness but fullness? What if it's not a crown of thorns but a crown, period, and the thorns are just there to keep the wrong people from trying it on? I once met a king, not the kind with a palace, the kind with peace. He lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Dresden, worked as a night shift janitor, owned 7 shirts and 1 perfect cast iron pan. He'd been married 3 times, engaged 5, had his heart broken in languages he couldn't pronounce. But at 57, he discovered something radical. He liked his own company better than anyone else's. "You know what changed?" He told me over coffee that tasted like enlightenment. "I stopped treating alone like it was a waiting room, started treating it like the destination." Here's what the self-help shamans won't tell you while they're peddling their couples retreats. A 2025 study from the Karolinska Institute found that men who embraced what researchers called intentional solitude for 1 year showed increased gray matter in the prefrontal cortex, lower inflammation markers, and, this is the kicker, higher levels of oxytocin than men in relationships. Their bodies were literally falling in love with their own existence. But let's not polish this too bright. The crown has weight. Some nights, you'll feel every thorn. Some mornings, you'll wake up and reach across the bed from muscle memory, finding only cool sheets and the echo of your own breathing. The crown doesn't promise happiness. Happiness is for greeting cards and pharmaceutical ads. The crown promises something rarer, sovereignty. Schopenhauer knew. That beautiful pessimist spent his last decades in Frankfurt with only his poodles for company, writing philosophy that would outlive empires. He said, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, He will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is really free. But here's where it gets deliciously subversive. The crown of solitude isn't about hating others. It's about loving yourself enough to stop needing them. It's the difference between being alone and being lonely, between solitude and isolation, between choosing yourself and being chosen by default. Picture this. A man wakes up on Sunday. No one to negotiate brunch with, no one to compromise on movies, no one to apologize to for existing exactly as he is. He makes coffee with the precision of a tea ceremony, reads philosophy in his underwear, takes a 3-hour bath with candles because why the hell not? Goes to bed when his body says so, not when someone else's schedule demands. This isn't sadness. This is sovereignty. This is what kings feel like. The ancient Stoics had a practice called negative visualization, imagining loss to appreciate presence. But we've got it backwards. We're so busy visualizing the presence of others that we can't appreciate the profound gift of our own absence from the theater of performed intimacy. I know what you're thinking. But what about connection? What about love? Listen carefully. The crown doesn't forbid love. It just stops begging for it. When you wear it, you love from abundance, not starvation. You share your kingdom instead of seeking asylum in someone else's. There's a forest in Japan where people go to disappear. Aokigahara, they call it. But there's another forest, invisible, growing in cities worldwide. Men who've disappeared into themselves and found, to their shock, that they were never lost. They were just looking in the wrong places. A philosopher in Copenhagen, city of fairy tales and existential dread, documented what he called the hermit's paradox. The more comfortable you become with solitude, the more attractive you become to others. But by then, and here's the cosmic joke, you no longer need their attraction to feel complete. The crown polishes itself through rituals. Morning coffee in absolute silence. Books read without interruption. Thoughts followed to their conclusion without someone asking what you're thinking. Meals eaten at exactly the temperature you prefer. Music played at volumes that match your mood, not someone else's tolerance. But the deepest polish comes from this: looking in the mirror and not seeing what's missing, but what's there. A complete human being. A closed circuit. A king in a kingdom of one, where every subject is loyal because every subject is you. So, here's my final question, Your Majesty. What if the love of your life is the life you're already living? What if the person you've been waiting for has been waiting in the mirror, patient as stone? And what if the crown of thorns you've been afraid to wear is actually the only crown worth polishing? Take your throne. The sunset is waiting.